Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. Thanks for having me out.
Great to have you, Bill. We're really honored to have you here today. And for the sake of the audience, I am here today with Bill Mazzetti, who is not only an incredibly knowledgeable guy in the data center space, but perhaps one of the larger-than-life influencers in the space who's been in it. He just shared with me when we were talking a bit before this session that he did his undergrad
College thesis, design thesis, 1983, was the mimic of the Charles Schwab data center high-rise built in San Francisco. So I go all the way back.
1983 data center guy. That is why he is at the top of the game in the pinnacle of the industry. And we're just going to hear a little bit about what you've done in the industry and how you've gotten to where you are today. So if you would, just share your journey, both personal and professional, that has brought you to Rosendin and running some of the largest data center projects in the world.
Okay. So, it's funny. I actually started my career out of college and worked for a couple of different firms. Joined my dad's firm in 1987. Did a lot of biotechnology, a lot of lab work. Actually, my first passion was really labs, and it just fell into that business. And then had done a little bit of work. Certainly, Charlie Krieger is one of my mentors. Charlie was an engineer in San Francisco with my dad. Charlie was in the hospital the day I was born. So one of my mentors has been one of my guys known me my entire life. And sadly, we lost Charlie a few years ago. But worked for Charlie first when I got out of the Army. And that's in the days where it's 415 hertz, water-cooled mainframes, really the VAX was around. Very, very different IT platforms, very different networking cores. Always liked the business, but then kind of went to work for Dad, kind of did biotech and labs, and then the internet business started coming back, and really in the payment processing business did a bunch of work for Visa, a bunch of work for MasterCard, and MasterCard was really, I think, my first break in the business. Did a bunch of work for Bank of America, and then I ended up going to a 7x24 conference in 1993 in Dallas, Texas, and I come back from this meeting and I sit down with the partners. Goes, how was it? Because we're a small firm. We're doing about $5 million a year, and the conference costs $800, and it's like it's kind of expensive for us back then. And I come back and I go, this internet, it's going to be a big thing. And so that was kind of the seminal moment when I was at Mazzetti & Associates, now Mazzetti, that was like, hey, listen, there's something underfoot that's going to change. And like any business person, we have an interest and we have a capability, let's pursue it. So we kind of go through what everybody's done in mission critical for years, really what I call the island fortresses, the tier 3, tier 4 facilities in banking and insurance and healthcare, worked through, throughout a lot of the Fortune 1000, Kaiser Hospitals, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Visa and MasterCard, as we mentioned, things like that, and kind of work our way through it. And then I think there's really kind of two critical moments for me personally in my company. One is I left Mazzetti in 2004, really wanted to make a career change, and mostly primarily because as Charlie, as a great mentor of mine, having your father as a boss is great, and I learned a ton from Dad, but dads are dads, right? So I have Charlie as kind of a surrogate dad. And by the way, to be mentored by a German engineer, you kind of have your shit wired pretty tight. Mm-hmm. And so Charlie goes, I leave Mazzetti, still a firm that's flourishing, really focusing on healthcare, not really my professional interest. And that's really where the divergence went. They really want to stay in healthcare and medical planning. They do a great job. In fact, we do a ton of work together. But really I want to stay in the IT side of the business. And I split off and looked for a job. And I talked to everybody. And I ended up at Rosendin because I want to be able to build the ideas I had. And in that case, so this is 2004. And right after that, I meet Chris Crosby at Compass Data Centers, and Chris is a longtime friend. That's when he just started with Digital,
right?
Yeah, he was at GI Partners, then Digital, and so I meet Chris at an AFCOM conference in Chicago, and this earnest, kind of clean scrubbed young guy comes up and he goes, "Hi, I'm Chris Crosby," kind of gives me the elevator speech, and I stop for a second and I go, "Damn, I never thought about data centers as a real estate solution," and Frank Nash is standing 15 feet from me and goes, and I do work with Frank because it's just the business, and I go, "Frank, get over here. You got to listen to this. This could be a big deal," which is the birth of the colo business as we know it.
Maybe that was the 350 Cermak discussion during
Yes.
that time, right? Yep.
And 200 Paul and that stuff. So they're kind of, so you look at 200 Paul, that was John Wilson contributing the Cambay assets to that, and then buying up all these kind of distressed assets and buildings in which that business, of course, has gone to where it is today. And I think that you move forward a little bit more and kind of the emergence of hyperscale. And so I worked at Microsoft, before Y2K. Actually, at Mazzetti, led the Y2K conformance team as a consultant for all critical facilities, which in that case was 17 call centers, 2 data centers, and Bill Gates' house. And so you go through this, but we watched this interesting thing happen in kind of the emergence of the cloud. Cloud at Microsoft came from the Xbox business, the gaming business, which is multiplayer environments done online. And you look at AWS, which has grown from the internal systems that Amazon ran its platform with and said, geez, we could sell this thing. And then I was very fortunate that one of my high school classmates, which is Tom Furlong, Tom's 2 years behind me at St. Ignatius Jesuit Prep School in San Francisco. Tom is at Yahoo and calls me up one day and goes, hey, listen, I'm going to change jobs. I'm interviewing this place called Facebook. Okay, and the funny part was, we're like a ripe old age of like 43 at the time. And he goes, I go, hey, all the kids in the family are on this thing. I don't know what to go. I mean, it looks like it's kind of cool. This is when Facebook's 150 people. So fast forward about 8 months, and we do the first PDU only deal at a digital facility for Facebook. The first job that they built, they took one pod, a megawatt and a quarter at 200 Paul. Tom Furlong was the owner's rep. Matt Engler, one of our CEOs, is the project manager. I'm the engineer of record. And from that, you just kind of, this is 2005, and it just kind of kept going and going and going. And so in that case, when I came to Rosendin, I had a background in mission critical because I've been doing it for years, although it's changing. And so, and we clearly saw at that time that data is becoming kind of a necessary utility to life, like water, like electricity, like air. You need clean air, clean water, got to be able to flush a toilet, got to get food. But now data is kind of part of the fabric of everything we do. And we've been able to basically continue to expand along that today, which is now a large part of the practice. We do about between 6 to 8% of the U.S. Internet infrastructure, so to speak, whether it's hyperscale or Kohler or whatever it is, every year. And it's a great business, been in it for a long time. You get to work with awesome people, awesome equipment, and honestly, you constantly innovate.
Amazing story, and explains why you are where you are today in your position in the industry. It's really interesting talking about the importance of data now, right? As data centers have grown to reflect that. Some even say we're in the fourth industrial revolution, and data centers have replaced the factories of the past, and data is the currency of culture, which explains the growth in connected devices. There's 25 billion today, and the CAGR for data centers. Where do you see this going? It's been doing this for so long. Is it going to continue?
So I think 2 things. When you talk about kind of enterprise work, when you're hyperscaler, you're like the large enterprises like Amazon or somebody else like that, you have the infrastructure to harvest a lot of data and kind of sort it out later. If you take a look at what we do at Rosendin, which in a context, I think we're synonymous with a lot of different businesses where we have data and we don't know quite how to use it yet, but we know that if we can get it to work together, our business is going to be a lot stronger. And then, by the way, but we have both a bunch of different tactics for doing that. So I think that data gathering is one thing, but as we all know, data warehouse is a critical part because we went 10 years into Oracle, realized the data warehouse was flawed. We literally we didn't throw it out, but it's like, we can't use that anymore. As we go to the next generation, they restacked. Our CIO did a great job at that, Matt Lamb. But then it's like that data and our abilities where we're actually seeing really things. We do, for example, predictive analytics on scheduling. Our biggest risk is really direct labor and schedule. So when we have changes come in, we'll model that kind of like a hurricane diagram and have 32 scenarios spit out of that. This is kind of the first time we've actually discussed it publicly. But we don't do that to against the owner of the GC. We're just trying to tell people, have you guys actually seen what this might look like if you do this? And it's like, no. And it's like, oh my gosh, then you can react a little earlier. The challenge we face in construction is a highly inventive, but deeply backward technology culture. And I think that what we're struggling with right now in construction, and certainly we're well behind manufacturing where you guys are as a company, is that people are trying to buy solutions out of box. Like, this will solve my problem. But then the problem is now you have all of these boxes around and they don't talk to each other, they don't work. And so some of that, it goes back to the interoperability piece. And so you can buy it, but I think our comment to everybody who's taking a data journey at like an enterprise of our size is, well, you can buy the foundational bricks, but that's not building the house. And to that, you have to basically put your own spin and touch to it. So it's not like, and I hate to say that, it's not that the software suppliers and the services providers are insufficient. It's really the context of how the data is being used, both in your everyday life and within the enterprise itself.
I think you're spot on with that statement and your prior one about the risks of just endless cheap storage, because the gathering of data is incredible, its acceleration is incredible, and if we start over distilling the real value of the data, the insight. Getting the insight becomes harder with the right data.
Well, and it's an interesting point because we talked about it earlier during the conference, which is, in the old days, we joke, and you and I were talking yesterday as we were out walking around for a hunt, and it was, people forget that we're in a 25 or 50 year cycle and just generally in energy policy and things are done. But, you know, in the old days in the banking industry, they talked about cost per transaction. That cost covered everything from the cycle time on the server to the energy to the whole thing and how much it costs to clear a check or clear an electronic transaction. I think that as the problem gets bigger and cost to carry go up, just to make it go or to hold it and maintain it, people will start either cutting back or prioritizing what's processed and what happens. Now the good news is the tools that are coming into the industry, all industries, from a machine learning and an AI basis, for example, we'll say at Rosendin, it's like, well, gosh, I mean, we're gonna do this kind of program, an AI program for backplane analytics, and they're like going, well, how come we do it 5 years ago? Our data pan reply from the CIO and myself, and the head of BIM, who does a lot of our development work, goes, those tools weren't invented till 3 years ago. People forget the cloud business is 8 years old or 10 years old. People think, oh my God, they feel, oh, it's been around for so long. It's less than a decade old.
Yep. And
from the point was one person started it at AWS. Yep. And then it's like all of a sudden it takes off. So, and look how fundamental cloud computing is. And VMware got to it with visualization before, but now as a commoditized product and a commoditized application at hyperscale, what is, people forget how fast it can change. But some of the tools we're all applying right now, whether it's infrastructure, you look at some of your engines that are kind of the next generation of engines, which are really kind of the clean slate, runs clean, bigger frame, versus stuff that's kind of older and iterative. Those changes are coming along right now. In that case, they weren't around 5 years ago. That tool wasn't available.
Yeah, and that's a whole different set of challenges. We could spend hours talking about the environmental challenges, regulatory, tier 4 emissions, particulate treatment, all as we continue to just gather data kind of unfettered for now. I do think there's a filtering coming, and I laugh at the challenge of trying to explain to this generation, my kids, for example, that you might have to delete things and not store everything. Whereas we grew up, cleaning hard drives and being restrained by their space. To completely switch gears, our audience knows that we're here at the Kohler Data Center's Power Down Conference to share ideas, talk about these very things, define trends and problems in the industry. So we've been working hard in doing that, but we've had a little fun.
We did.
We happen to have some pretty good golf courses here in Kohler, namely Whistling Straits, coming right off a fantastic Ryder Cup. But you and I chose to do something a little different. We did a little hunting yesterday, a little shooting yesterday. Tell me about your, personally, where that comes from you. How did that develop? What does it mean to you?
A couple things. So one is that my two great passions are upland bird hunting and golf. So I'm a secretary of my golf club in San Francisco. We're about to restore the course to the Alistair McKenzie design from 1934. Gil Hans is doing that work. We put the blade to the place in 3 weeks. Ironically, I'm running that job because I run stuff in construction, and we have do a little earthwork in our renewable energy business. So golf's always been a passion. Came from my dad. Bird hunting came from my father as well. But kind of historically, my family is from, and my father's side of the family is from the Piemonte. So it's up around Asti, kind of northwestern parts of Italy, very rural, and just, you look at pictures from my family from 2 or 3 generations ago, and when my grandfather worked for Stoffer Chemicals, sold ag chemicals in the wine business back in Sonoma County for years, lived in the marina right by the Palace of Fine Arts, Lyon and Jefferson, and the weekends they would go to the country property up in Fulton, which is up in Sonoma County, and take the ferry across and drive up, and all you would see over the weekends, and this is my grandparents, my parents, and my uncles, and that side, the Mazzetti side of the family, and they're up in the country all weekend, and they're out hunting, they're hunting rabbits and birds, and they're at the country place, and they come down Sunday night, they go up Friday afternoon, kind of like it is today, except you go to wine country, to a country estate, I would say. But so that's kind of the outdoorsman's always been it. My father's also an avid fisherman, never really got the bug for it, even though I've several friends putting the lean on me for it. And as I would tell my wife, I have enough expensive hobbies. And another one probably would after being married 32 years, would probably be back to the side of the head. So the upland bird work is really something that both harken back to kind of historical family trends and like it. A lot of great friends at the club. I hunt with the same 3 or 4 people. My cousin is my regular hunting partner, and we probably do 20, 25 days a year. We eat 100% of everything that comes off the barrel of the gun. I would say that I would love to have your pheasant pot pie recipe. On the other hand, though, I will send my pheasant piccata and my pheasant marsala recipe
Good trade.
back to you. And so that's how we got it, and it's a little different. Avid golfer, played Whistling Straits 4 times. But people forget, after the Ryder Cup, they don't cut the rough as fast as you think they do. And you go out there and it's like the rough's still 3 inches deep, and it's really kind of emotionally scarring to play a golf course that hard. So I figured we'd go out and walk around with some friends in the field for a couple hours yesterday, and in a beautiful fall day in Wisconsin, and chase birds, which we did.
I think a far better alternative.
Indeed.
And thank you for that. And thanks for this discussion and your time here this couple of days. It's been wonderful. And for sharing your story and your success with our audience.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks. I have to say is that the conference was one of the better 2 days I've spent professionally. This is, you come to the conference and it's like you're actually able to talk about, for example, like energy policy, which is something that we're all involved with. You talk about pollutants, but how we're going to deal with that as an industry. And this is actually the first time in probably 10 years that we've come up and people aren't talking to you with the presentation, but you're able to interact with everybody, both with you guys, with the folks at Schneider, with my peers that are coming as your guests. And actually, I got a lot out of this thing. There's things I'm taking home that I'm going to work on locally and regionally on energy policy and pollution policy, and other things that I picked up. Goes, I didn't know that, and I'm gonna put that at work when I get home. So
I'll toast to that.
Salute.
To conclude. Thank you so
Have
much.
a great fall. Thank you for the invite. It's been great.